seems appropriate as we talk about how we build movements and how we kind of, communicate with each other, and how in a new generation we have all these opportunities to kind of strengthen those connections. And so it's just exciting to be in this room with people I've known for over a decade, still doing this work.
Yes.
So Clifton.
Yes.
It is so good to see you. It hasn't been that long. We just saw each other 2 days ago.
2 days ago, and then I went back to DC, right? I had a workshop. We were talking about youth activists in the media and how certain stories are underreported, and I was facilitating the conversation. But yeah.
So you're completely unmotivated. After keynoting the Teen Vogue Summit on Saturday.
Here to have a...
So I feel so lucky to be in conversation with you. You and I met because so shortly after the Parkland shooting, Teen Vogue had put together a cover story with the students that were speaking out in Parkland. But because we're Teen Vogue, we had to go one layer deeper and really make the connection, as many activists like Clifton have done for a long time, between these mass shootings and what was happening in the suburbs to police shootings and to violence in Black communities. And so Clifton was one of the subjects that we found, partially because he is a phenomenal activist and looks great in pictures. And so I want to start with, actually, because Amina was just talking about books.
Yes.
When I got here today to get my makeup done, you were sitting in the corner reading Angela Davis.
Yes.
Now, most people your age are on Instagram and they're taking selfies, which is fine too. But tell me, how did Angela come across your path, and why are you reading Angela Davis?
I love, first and foremost, Fresh Live, thank you. Thank you for creating this space right now. I think it's important. I come from a movement of many young leaders. There are many young leaders, you won't know their names. And it's important that folks like me are up on this stage telling our stories right now. So thank you. Thank you for having me here today. Angela Davis is just one of my heroes. I have many heroes. I remember she came to St. Louis to speak. She delivered a speech in 2015, and she was talking about how Ferguson started a global movement, really. And she was making the connections between Ferguson and Palestine, and talking about capitalism and race and feminism. And that was powerful for me to hear that. And then I would look at certain documentaries of Angela Davis. In one documentary, she's talking about violence and how the interviewer asked her, do you accept violence? Do you endorse violence? She says, what's violence is the pain that this government is inflicting upon us. And I just studied my ancestors in general. I think the previous panel speaker, she was talking about reading books. Well, I read my ancestors because at some point they encounter many of these obstacles that we face. They might even have some solutions for us. So reading Angela is just another part of my enjoyment, but also my research, and it helps me grow and learn as an activist. So yeah.
Great. So let's go back a little to how you entered into activism. Yes. The year is 2014. Mike Brown has been killed in cold blood by police officer Darren Wilson. His body is left there for hours. The media at that point doesn't fully know how to deal with it. And in the weeks and the months that precede it, he is not indicted by the grand jury. Talk to me about, so Mike Brown was 18.
Yes.
From Ferguson. You were 17 at the time.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what was happening in your life then and how you were feeling.
Wow. It's not so long ago, right? It'll be 4 years this August since I became one of the prominent leaders in the movement, and since I've just started literally traveling the country to fight for my own life, right? Fight for all of our lives. I remember at the time I was in a state of depression. It was July 2014. I was in a state of depression, anxiety. I didn't want to leave the house. I didn't want to talk to anybody because I had just lost my mother to stage 4 breast cancer. I'm sorry. It's just so hard still.
I know.
She battled stage 4 breast cancer for about 10 years. My dad was an alcoholic. He was abusive. I'm the third eldest of 8 children. We grew up in poverty. I was on government assistance. I remember like wearing the same clothes to school at a point. And when my mom passed, I blocked the world off. And I think when August 9th happened, I was on Instagram. Some spontaneous. I just got on social media. I'm like, let me interact with people. Mm-hmm. And then on August 9th, I saw Michael Brown's body. And at first, I didn't think it was real. You know, but black youth in particular, were so desensitized to images of us, you know, being murdered, shot up in media, and then we're largely ignored when pain is inflicted upon us, right? And sometimes we ignore it ourselves. So I thought it was fake. And then I realized it was right around the corner from my high school. My high school is Lutheran High School North. Lutheran school, very small. Before I attended that school, I was in Hazelwood Public Schools all my life. So right around the corner from my high school, right around the corner from my grandma's house. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to just sit here. I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to see what's going on. And when I got out there, if you were... you know you could filter pictures, you know, put it in black and white. If you were to take a picture of what you seen that day, put it in black and white, you would have thought it was 1965. I'm not kidding you. And even worse, because you saw the militarization of the police. You saw a community, my community, we were just trying to mourn, right? We weren't wanting to be activists or protesters or organizers. I did not want to be an activist or a protester. Understand that. We had to. We were just trying to mourn. We were trying to figure out why they had left a dead black boy in the streets for 4 hours. And then they met us with the violence, right? They met us with the tear gas and the rubber bullets and the smoke bombs. These things that you would see being used on black and brown bodies across this globe in occupied Palestine and in the Middle East. And these same military weapons were being used on me and my friends and my family. And you know, my first time, I was tear gassed so many times, I can't even count anymore. But one of my earliest times getting tear gassed was August 12th. And I remember going to school the next day. During that whole time, I would protest all the way up until the early hours of the morning, then go straight to school, go to my grandma's house, who's right around the corner, and get a shower, quick shower, go to school. My grandma didn't know any of that was happening, but she knew my homework was getting done, right? And, you know, I'm sitting in the classroom, my eyes are bloodshot red. Some of my friends know I've been out there that night, and because of the tear gas, can I rewind real quick?
Yeah. I
want to talk about my first time getting tear gas.
Yeah.
So like, we're on West Florissant. There's a little girl standing on the corner. They're firing off the warnings, you know. And at first, I didn't think it was tear gas. I thought it was smoke. You know, what do they teach you in elementary school? Stop, drop, and roll, right? Mm-hmm. So I got down on the ground and I stopped, dropped, and rolled, and the smoke, the gas began to fill my lungs and my insides, and I began crying. But I wasn't crying because it was hurting, and it hurt a lot. But I was crying because I couldn't realize that something like that could happen in today's America, especially under a black president. I couldn't believe that, you know, these same people who I grew up thinking they were supposed to serve and protect me were criminalizing me, were terrorizing me. And so then that next day I went to school, and my teacher is sitting there talking about how, oh, those thugs, those looters, those violent criminals out there protesting. Me. You know, she didn't know that. They just need to stop protesting. They just need to go vote. You know, they need to do it the old way. You know, those thugs. And that angered me.
Yeah.
You know, but I got up and I went home. I texted about 20 of my friends. I said, come on over to my house. I don't know what we were going to do. I didn't know what we were going to do. But about that night about 100 to 200 kids came out to my crib. And we built a bonfire in the back of my house. And I realized what we did within that moment. We built collective youth power, and we established a coalition called Our Destiny STL. And we were the first ones to establish like the national walkouts, and we did the organizing and protests inside and outside of schools and community service. We registered 18-year-olds all across the St. Louis area to vote, and we were called terrorists, right? We're called thugs. I think our government right now calls us black identity extremists,
yes,
or something like that. And so now I'm here. I'm trying to figure out how do we transform our society.
Yeah. So you were one of the first young people, and you were in high school at the time, to really organize in Ferguson. I mean, there was Black Lives Matter was there. There was a lot of youth organizers that were doing work. But I do think that one of the things the media missed was all the youth organizing that happened. Right now, youth organizers are getting quite a bit of attention. Yeah. In the media for walkouts, for protests. The largest youth gathering ever in Washington just happened. How has the coverage been different from when you and your fellow students were organizing boycotts and walkouts versus the way you're seeing how these young, more affluent students are being treated by the media?
No, well, first of all, no knock to the young people right now that are organizing right now across this country. We are born into a world that is separated by race, class, violence, and we're called right now to save this world. So salute to all the young people right now standing up. Yeah. But back then, when we were starting to organize, again, like we were called thugs, looters. They wanted to suspend us. Some of us couldn't even go back to our schools after we walked out. In my school, they called me Malcolm X. They would.
Can't imagine why.
I can't imagine why. But they would let me speak in chapel, and I would always talk about how it's important that this institution, the school, pays attention to the revolution that's going on around the corner. The media in the area, the St. Louis American was very helpful. They were always trying to amplify our stories and amplify our voices and tell the truth. But some media just didn't get it right. They just couldn't understand why black people were out there. They couldn't understand why we were upset about the conditions in our neighborhoods, and they were just solely focused on violence. And I question that. I think that we always talk about violence, rather than the context that creates the situations. And the media is getting a little better at it. But we've got a long way to go, and it's going to happen because we're pushing back, not because they decide to all of a sudden tell and do the right thing. There has to be a mass movement. I talked with Matt, who's the chief strategist over at March for Our Lives, talked with Emma, and they know this. They know that the media largely ignores black youth because we've been protesting for gun reform now for a long time. We understand that that police violence is also gun violence, right? You can't talk about, universal background checks and banning assault rifles unless you also talk about taking away the military weapons from the police. They use smoke bombs on us. I still have a scar on my arm from a rubber bullet. We got a long way to go.
And you were at March for Our Lives.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And did you bring a contingent there? Were you there with some of the students that you had organized with? And, yeah.
Kenidra. I was there with my mentee, Kenidra Woods. She's also on the cover.
Who's also one of the Teen Vogue cover stars, yes. So two things. First, I just want to say, and now we've worked together a few times, and every time we spend time with the Parkland activists, what I think is most remarkable, whether media wants to acknowledge it or not, is that they have been inspired by you and the work that you've done. They do not forget Mike Brown's name, and they do not forget the names of so many brutally killed young black youth. And I think that that is part of why people are so afraid of them, because they continue to bring an intersectional analysis. What was the experience of going to the March for Your Lives, having been working on this issue for the last 5 years? And did you feel that it was intersectional enough? Did you feel that it represented what you were there fighting for?
Okay, so the march was phenomenal. I know many of the organizers personally, so it's, the March for Our Lives was definitely trying to be inclusive, and I'm speaking about the organizers. Whether it was the broad range of speakers, the message that was being delivered, I loved it. But I've been doing this for a little minute, so I pay attention to the fact that we just can't organize organizers. We have to build a mass movement. How do we organize collective power and massive people? So I paid more attention to the crowd. And when there were black speakers delivering their message, folks would turn around. They would turn their heads. They would laugh at them. Some would cuss at them. Some would laugh at how they're talking. And I realized, there's not just a problem on the right with racism. We have a problem on the left with racism. We have to deal with so many issues if we want to build a mass movement and transform the society. Because at the end of the day, intersectionality is this idea that race, class, gender, sexuality, all these things are inseparable within our sphere, within our society. And the only way we build that movement is if we continue to speak about our issues in an intersectional way. We can't ignore police violence. We can't ignore poverty in black communities. We also can't ignore the fact that all of this is, all of our problems, the root of it is coming from capitalism. Yeah, you can climb. I think right now, organizers are speaking about how to be intersectional. We're just trying to figure out how do we do this on a massive level.
Yep.
But it's going to happen. And I was hopeful, though, that day, because I did see children. I saw black youth come together. I saw women leading. I saw so many different identities come together. And that's just the start.
Yeah.
That was just the start.
And the world got to meet Naomi Wadler.
Oh, yeah. It's so cool.
She was amazing. Okay, last question.
Okay.
Everything we're talking about, when we think about the depth of the issues that we're facing, when we think about the traumas and the tragedies and families that are going home and their children are gone, it is so overwhelming.
Yes.
It is so hard to feel hopeful in this moment and to stay motivated. And as an activist, I imagine you have to find that hope. What is your secret? Tell us. How do you stay hopeful?
Well, that's a very good question. Growing up, my mom would always tell my brothers and sisters. I got 3 other brothers and 4 sisters, so it's 4 boys, 4 girls. She would tell us we're like a chain that has to be kept strong. And if one link is off, then the whole chain is off. And that's how I think about our movement. That's how I think about our society in general. Right now, profit is the driving force for our society. We live in a capitalistic society, so as long as we have capitalism, we're always going to have poor people. We're always going to have a poor working class, and there will always be class struggle. You talked about intersectionality and building this mass movement. I remember that 3 years ago, people weren't talking about police violence. People weren't talking about socialism. People weren't talking about how do we, and all socialism is how are people's basic needs met? They throw this negative connotation on all these terms, but we don't read. How do we make sure that our communities are resourced properly? How do we make sure that my mother, who didn't have proper access to healthcare, how do we make sure that more mothers get that? And that goes beyond profit. That's how do we make sure people's needs are the driving force, not profit. And that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Thank you.